Shalom and welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt, and as you can see, someone is missing. My wife, Kara, is at a youth ministers conference this week, so say a prayer for her. We're very excited. Right now in our congregation, we don't have dedicated staff for youth ministry, and so she is at our church the director of Christian education, and so she sort of heads up the scheduling of volunteer workers that we have for our children. And she also teaches our middle and high school students on Wednesday nights, takes them through Bible studies and lessons. And I'm very proud of what she is doing. And so she's getting not only some, I was going to say rest, but not really rest this week. She's getting a great education and good camaraderie with other youth workers from around the United States. So many thanks to folks at the youth summit that she is at. And we, of course, are in prayer for her. Also, before we begin in our Torah portion study this week, please say a prayer for us as we are leaving next week for Portugal. We'll be there with Rabbi Shapira. And of course, our dear friends, Marco and Luana, their son is having a bar mitzvah, and we're so excited about that. And we're doing a conference there. So no doubt we will have lots of video for you to share with you. So this week we are in a double portion of Tazria-Metzora. And what's interesting is the first Torah portion begins with things that have to do with childbirth and purity laws and things like that. And then we get into Metzora, a word that means a leper, someone who is dealing with Tzara'at, this skin disease that is a physical manifestation of a spiritual problem. And just as we spoke about in Pearls of Torah this week, it seems like these two things aren't connected, but they really are when we talk about purity, purification, becoming ceremonially clean, and things like that. So, as you know, we are in this Rashi Torah discussion commentary by the JPS. We're doing that all this year for the Rashi Nosh. We've really enjoyed it. And this week we're focusing, because we normally focus on a couple discussion questions, we're focusing on those questions from the Parasha of Tazria. So let me read to you this wonderful section here on page 87 of this commentary entitled 2020. If asked to identify a job that requires perfect vision, many people would rightly answer Air Force pilot. That would require perfect vision. The U.S. Air Force does have vision standards. Only candidates with vision correctable to 2020 are accepted into its flight training program. This parasha identifies a role in the Jewish community that also had vision requirements. So when it says there in Leviticus 13:12, if the eruption, talking about Tzara'at, about leprosy, if the eruption spreads out over the skin so that it covers all of the skin of the affected person from head to foot, wherever the priest or the Kohen can see. Rashi explains a reference to the priest's vision, wherever the priest can see. This phrase comes to exclude a priest whose eyesight has dimmed, i.e. a priest with one blind eye or with impaired vision in both eyes, that he may not rule on the status of the lesions. This comes from Rashi on his comment on this verse, Leviticus 13:12. So as Rashi explains, only priests who do not have a vision impairment are qualified to determine whether a person with lesions suffers from Tzara'at. Until the invention of eyeglasses in the 13th century in Italy, people's daily lives were affected in significant ways by visual deficiencies. For example, individuals who were farsighted, even if literate, could not read, and those who were nearsighted probably could not hunt. Today, since poor vision can generally be corrected with glasses or surgery, there are fewer practical constraints on account of eyesight. We are fortunate to live in a time when vision and certain other health-related problems have largely been addressed. Medical improvements and the accompanying increase in life expectancy have created issues that were not prevalent in earlier generations. Some older adults who remain in excellent physical health find the traditional retirement age of 65 to be neither desirable nor financially feasible. Typically, they are the most experienced workers in the company and can often continue to make significant contributions to their employers if they remain on the workforce past age 65. Sometimes senior employees will start to experience the effects of aging in ways that negatively affect their job performance. If there is mutual respect and interest, the employer and employee can find ways to accommodate disabilities such as reduced vision and auditory acuity and loss of mobility with results that benefit both parties. Now, we have some discussion questions as always, but let me just say that in our own life experience, in our own family, we experience this. My father is 72, and he will be, at the time of this video, about a week out from a complete knee replacement, a total knee replacement on his left knee. Now, he's been having difficulty, getting around because of the pain in his knee. He needed this surgery. But even the day of the surgery, they had him up and walking with a walker. He's going through physical therapy. Now, he still is not retired. He's very active. In fact, he heads up our church's food pantry ministry. And so he's on equipment, driving trucks and forklifts and packing boxes, doing very manual, physical labor type activities, even in his early 70s. This just wasn't the case a number of years ago. In fact, his father died in 1985 at only 64 years of age. The more we advance in medicine and exercise and just eating right, just the science of living longer, it seems that as our life expectancy goes up, these types of things need to be taken into consideration. I know for a fact that financially my dad could not afford to retire at this point, so he's still going. Now, the financial aspect isn't the only reason that he is still working. It's just good for a human being to have something to do, to have a job, and in his case, someone who has a lot of experience doing it. I like how this was worded. He's, one of the most senior members of his team, and he has a lot of experience and knows the ins and outs of doing the food pantry ministry. So it's good that he's still involved. Now, the questions that we have here, let me ask us this one. Has aging had any impact on your professional performance? If so, describe the impact and how you have dealt with it. If not, what impact might it have in the future, and how would you try to address it? Now, I will say that the older we get, and I turn 50 this coming June, I will turn 50, and I will say that I don't have the physical stamina that I had when I was 25 or when I was 18. When I was in youth ministry as a younger man, I was doing a lot of physical activities, doing a lot of running around with the young people, playing games with them that involved a lot more physical activity. I also worked at an organization called the Boys and Girls Club. It was sort of an after-school program for children and young people that had me playing basketball or kickball or soccer or things like this, where, when you get to be about 50, and if you're like me and you have asthma, you aren't quite running around as much anymore. I will tell you that recently I played a concert at a music festival with my brother and my son, and after playing 4 hours of music, I was quite tired. We're out in the sun, it's in the middle of the day, the heat is kind of draining your energy, plus you're performing, your adrenaline is up, you're trying to keep the audience engaged because it's a music festival. And I will say, when I got home that night, my wife asked me in a half joking tone, why are you still doing this? Why are you putting your body through this? But I think as long as we physically can do something that we like to do, we will continue to do it. Now, I'm not jumping around the stage or doing anything like that I might have done as a younger man. I'm pretty much standing in one place with my guitar and singing these songs. So it's not as physically demanding as it might have been in the past, but you just adjust. you just adjust. I will say that, I'm certainly not old, but even at nearly 50, I can't remember song lyrics the same way that I used to. So you accommodate for that. You have your iPad up there to, you can take a quick glance at it and remember what the next verse begins with or something like that. You just make those adjustments. And I think all of us need to make those adjustments. Sometimes it's difficult for us psychologically to adjust to aging. I know people that it has been very difficult for them to accept the use of a cane or a walker, or even in some cases a wheelchair, where they can't get around as good anymore. There's a particular gentleman that I have worked with for many years in the recording studio. He's an actor, but he also sings. And in recent months and in the last few years, he's been having a more difficult time getting around. He deals with a lot of pain in his shoulders and in other joints. And in fact, this Monday is his birthday. He turns 88. And the older he gets, the more difficult it is for him to get around. And I'm wondering how he will handle perhaps needing to address the issue of maybe he should start walking with a cane just to be more sure of his steps. But it's difficult for all of us as we age. And I have a suspicion that for us as men, it might even be more difficult than it is for ladies. Now, another question that we could have here is, do you think reasonable accommodations should be made for older employees who desire to continue to work despite some moderate age-related disability? I think that's a kind thing to do. I think there comes a time where you still can do something. You still can do this, even though once in times past you could do these other things. But the older we get, if we can't do these things anymore, we can at least do this. Toward the end of her life, my grandmother, my father's mother, that we affectionately referred to as Granny, she lived to be over 100 years old. And toward the end of her life, one of the only things that she could do as far as volunteering around the church was to fold our church bulletins, the program that we hand out to everyone as they walk in. This was something that was important to her, and it was a job that she could do. She didn't have to do a lot of walking. She could sit in a chair and fold 100 bulletins, and it was an appreciated thing. That thing needs to be done every week. And now that she has gone to be with the Lord, it is someone else that does that. But that was something that Granny could do. Her eyesight wasn't the best, and it was difficult for her to move, but she sat in a chair and could fold these bulletins. She still had something that she can do, and we made accommodation for that. I think it's a kind thing to do, to give an accommodation to someone who perhaps they are maybe not as nimble as they once were, maybe not as active as they once were, but they still want to be involved. I think it's a beautiful thing to make an accommodation for them. So as we see here, the priest, the one that was doing the examining, had to have wonderful vision. So there are things that we do in our lives, in our ministries, in our vocations, that they require a certain amount of ability. There are other things that we can do that maybe don't focus on what we are unable to do, but focus on what we are still capable of doing. I remember before my father had eye surgery, he could, barely read a book. You'd have to put it very far away from his eyes for him to be able to read it. And he had cataract surgery and does very well now. So there may come a time when, as we age, what would you do if you couldn't physically read anymore? What would you do if you needed to walk with the aid of a cane or a walker or even a wheelchair or a scooter, a mobility scooter? These are things that all of us as we age need to think about and need to address in our lives. And perhaps we need to think about them before they happen to us. so that we know how to face them. I think this is a wonderful discussion that we can have in this particular Torah portion. Thank you once again for joining me as you join me and normally my wife Kara with us every week. If you're new to this particular broadcast, join us in future weeks where we are both here, or you can always go back and look at previous teachings on the Torah portion as we go through the Rashi Nosh. Thank you so very much. As I said, please keep us and Rabbi Shapira and everyone else involved in the Portugal conference next week in your prayers. And we just are praying for you that God's richest blessings would be applied to you and your family. Thank you so much for joining us. Shalom.